Welcome to session 5 of our Wild Power Retreat. I'm here with Kitty Maguire. I hope that you've been enjoying this retreat and that you feel inspired to make 2022 your year of cycle awareness, and that you've received some great insights from the conversation so far from Nicole and Natalie and Lisa, as well as Shani and Alexandra. Okay, today we're talking about how cycle awareness can support healing and how it can support whatever you're healing in your life, whether that could be from grief or from something that's happened in your past, or if you're working with an emotional pattern that you know you want to shift. And we're going to look at how to work with your cycle, track your cycle in a trauma-informed way so that you can really harness the healing potential. I'm here with Kitty Maguire, who has 20 years of teaching experience, including ballet to personal training to hatha yoga and also yoga for trauma, and more recently menstrual cycle awareness trainings with the mentorships that she runs, and retreats that align with the Celtic calendar as well. She's a graduate of the Red School Menstruality Leadership Program, and she's currently doing the Red School Menstruality Medicine Circle training along with me. Kitty, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time. How are you doing?
I'm great. Delighted to be here, Sophie. So thanks for having me.
Let's start with a cycle check-in. So for those of you listening, you can fill your cycle check-in in the Wild Power Journal if you've downloaded that. Kitty, could you share what day you're on and 3 words, if you can, that distill the feelings that you're experiencing today?
So I am on day 18, which is the end of my inner summer. I ovulated late this month, so I'm still in the inner summer energy, and the words, there's a lovely sense of contentment with this summer cycle. And then there's a busy giddiness that's going on in my body, and if I'm honest, a little bit hungry now that I think of it.
Hungry for food or hungry for life?
All of it.
Thanks, Kitty. This is a really big topic that we want to explore today in our 30-minute space of time. There's so much that we could talk about, but I really appreciate you being here to share some of your experiences with your cycle awareness practice and healing, and hopefully this is going to plant some seeds for our listeners for whatever they're working with in their own cycle awareness practice. So can we start with your experience of cycle awareness and healing? You know, you speak about womb healing work. Could you talk about how your cycle awareness practice has helped you with your womb healing?
I suppose it's absolutely been transformational and life-changing, really, because I don't think I realized how much grief and trauma and just stuck energy that was held in my womb space. I'm naturally a very creative person, and I think with that came a lot of chaos. It's also, I suppose, chaos is definitely a big part of I suppose it would have been in my upbringing. We were a lot of women, a lot of creative energy, so there was a lot of hustle and bustle. So I suppose my cycle has it's absolutely my biggest ally. I think it was definitely later in the grand scheme of things. I suppose the depths of my menstrual cycle awareness work has properly connecting with your inner womb ecology. I'd say I'm doing that the guts of 6 proper good years, and then before it's just the apps of like you're charting when you menstruate, when you like charting just the science behind it. But I suppose really sitting in the undercurrent of it and tapping into the spiritual side of our bodies and our cycle, but also seeing it as this gateway, like this ally to facilitating greater and deeper healing. for yourself and your bloodline. So for me, I think I always feel very much so the likes of us who are here now, pioneers of this work, we're absolutely this light in the bloodline, and we're thrashing through just any ancestral trauma that we've brought with us through, you know, maybe our mothers, our grandmothers, and we're going forwards, just learning how to be menstrual activists and using it as a way to support our bodies and selves. So that's been a real game changer for me. I think it was a very gradual journey to get really into womb embodiment for me. I think because it was a very tough place to go. There was definitely a lot of shame in there. And yeah, I like you mentioned there, the Celtic calendar, or the Celtic wheel, as some people might know it. This is like the seasonal cycle. So winter, spring, summer, autumn. And in Ireland, that goes from, well, in the Celtic tradition, it goes from the 1st of November till the 31st of October. So that's, you know, one cyclical year. So I would have started with that. We learn that in primary school here, and then for some reason it goes off the Richter scale because you get into the more educational side of things. And then I suppose through later years, just coming back to it through, there's a great woman here in Ireland called Mary Kennedy, who would have brought a lot of that, the Celtic wheel, taken from the teachings of Dolores Whelan, who was reviving the cyclical nature of seasonal cycles. So that would have been quite rooted. So it was quite a natural, for me, I found it a very easy progression to go into mirroring the menstrual cycle with the Celtic wheel. So that's been really transformational, because I was able to see where I was really struggling, where I was losing myself, where my nervous system was just like jumping out of my body. Like it was so far from being in the center of my body. It was just really struggling. So I think that's been a really, on the trauma informed side of things, for me, just to be able to even make friends with anxiety and feel like, I always call it like the bird in my cage, which was like there was that pound in my heart, or this, it was like the birdie was like being really held tight by a little bird cage. And you learned to communicate with the bird in my cage. And it was just like, what do you need? What do you want? And I think that I learned how to do that first. It was like, it was so in my heart, because that's where I was feeling the pain. And then that mirrored into my womb heart. I was able to take what I learned about just trying to support my body and my anxiety that was very much so trapped around my solar plexus, which is where we hold shame. It's our ability to present ourselves to the world. So if that's shut down or blocked, we start to close in and get small. So it was quite very natural, because I was building this toolkit from practices that I've been picking up over the last 10 years, I'd say, you know, from really starting to meet the edges of myself. You know, whereas, you know, I'd say before, like when I was a personal trainer or teaching dance or working with children or things like this, you know, I was able to work my body on a functional side of things, and as a Pilates teacher. But I suppose that yoga was the gateway in to the inner work. And then it's like every year a new teaching came along. So I know a lot of people can feel quite upset that they find that they get to this work late, but because, you know, that great saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I just trust that we all find it when our emotional capacity is probably really able to go there, especially with the womb trauma or the womb shame, because some of these are big stories, and I definitely feel like it takes time and softness and great consciousness. And sure, look, we're always talking about awareness in this work, and I personally don't feel you know, when I was early 20s, that would I have been embodied or able, or would I have like I probably would have laughed in the face of all this work. I would have just been like, periods, like immature about it. So it is very funny. I do catch that, my inner brat sometimes going, how have you ended up in the world talking about periods? We used to laugh at periods. So it's very funny to have even healed the the shame around it, and really go out into the community and be so celebrated and have such a support in your community. Because I definitely feel, I'm based in Dublin in Ireland, there's such a hunger and an appetite, whereas I'd say even 3 or 5 years ago, it was like pulling teeth trying to get people into a menstrual circle. It was a bit kind like my other work. I could have 30 or 50 people in a workshop, whereas you'd be lucky to get 10 in a menstrual circle. But
it's on the rise, isn't it? Amazingly, it's big time on the rise. Kitty, I would love to ask you specifically about something that you've spoken about publicly, and it's very generous of you to do so, but your own experience of having a traumatic time in your life, and then healing it. And you speak really beautifully about the void, how the void in the cycle has been a really healing resource for you. Could you share a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I suppose like many, I don't think I realized how disconnected and how much I was suffering at this stage of my cycle. And I felt really like I was going mad every month. But I didn't even notice that there was such a significant loss of sense of self. And it was just like, oh, today I'm just a battle axe, or there's something really wrong with me, or I'm horrible person. And the paranoia, just like I definitely think learn how to support that part of myself, that real.
Sorry, Kitty, you broke up a little bit there. Could you just go back again to when you were talking about the paranoia?
Oh yeah. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I was hearing or having real chronic episodes of paranoia, like just so much so that you just to go outside the house was just starting to get a little bit uncomfortable. It was just kind of going, I didn't even want to go to the shop, and I felt like I'm going to say something wrong, or there was just like I had no control of my mouth, or I just felt so disconnected from my body. And when I look back, I'm fascinated by that I just accepted that was something that happened to me all the time. And the loneliness wound was coming up so chronically. So there was like this double-edged sword, like a hunger and a yearning to be with people and to have comfort in this challenging time in my cycle, but also then just not feeling like I had the mouth to brain skills to function. So it was just a bit it was quite stressful. So I feel learning how to support that. I think especially when I was on the MLP, the Menstrual Leadership Program with Alexandra, I remember I went there in the void and I was just like, I had 10 tons. I just felt like I was having, all the tabs were open and I was just like.
And I just want to clarify for people that don't know what the void is. We're talking about the space in your premenstruum just before you bleed, which sometimes might be an hour long, or sometimes might be a couple of days or more long. Is that what you're?
Yeah,
that's what you're with, isn't it, Kitty?
So, but for me, I suppose it was a couple of days long. I wish it had only been a few hours long. So it's absolutely, a window of great darkness. But I remember on my MLP, Alexandra say, kind of just, we were having a chat on her own, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I just said, "No, I'm really suffering today. I don't know how to, I didn't know how to exist in the circle, and I held circles for a living, but I was like, I'm really struggling." And she just said, "Well, you're an ecstatic, Kitty." And she just, it was just quite healing for me that Alexandra just gave me a full language to make peace with this epic sense of failure in myself. And then she was saying, you know, being an ecstatic comes with great, you know, there's great gifts in that, but then we also have the polarity to that. So I think that was like just being feeling held in that and understood and seen. It's almost like this, yeah, definitely an awakening of sense. And now I don't fear my void place because I have it marked out in my diary. So even if my bleed does come earlier, I just try to trickle off as little as possible. So there's as little to do. And even if, you know, I did start to bleed, because I am somebody who needs to just batten down the hatches when inner winter comes, when I start bleeding. I don't feel like still going out. I like to just get cozy and maybe a little walk with the dog if I have to. But so I do try and just keep the space before my bleed, the void, as supported as possible. So now when I'm in this place, in Ireland we'd call it Ihahauna. In other parts of the world they call it Halloween. So it's like, this is the spirit world, and I really do now, at times when I do give myself space and permission, I can feel the witchiness coming up. I can feel the potency and just the great surge. Like I do feel like there's this volcano erupting, whereas before I would have like really kept pulling away from it, but there's nowhere to go. It's in me. I can't escape it. So whereas now I've got a lot more comfort with leaning in and listening for the signs and just hearing asking my body, like asking my heart, like that bird in my cage, because anxiety for me can just go through the roof. So again, it's just coming back to that nervous system. If I'm so in the sympathetic, which is like just the kind, for me it's a bit frantic, I just really need to sit and regulate that. And maybe it's a really long hot bath, or my feet in some Epsom salts water, or with some herbs or essential oils, but something just to make me feel my feet, because I'm a Libra and I'm very flighty, I'm airy, and I'm giddy. Like I naturally have a child's, still holding on to that child's giddy energy. So it disembodies me. So it's been really comforting to make peace. And now that's the catalyst for the rest of my cycle. So it's been definitely light at the end of a very dark tunnel.
Wow, you're pointing to so many fascinating things here. I just want to come back to what you do to take care of your nervous system, especially in like times of heightened emotion. And I imagine there are many ecstatics listening to this conversation, people who have big emotions, like big joy, big grief, big anger. So in that inner autumn void phase, when these big emotions are present, you're leaning in. So can you say more about what that looks like? Like, what does it mean to lean in?
So let's just, so let's just say there's no awareness yet, and we just have this sense of running around like a headless chicken. So that can be our first point of awareness, to just be like, I'm just a bit fast right now. If life feels manic, too fast, out of control, all the tabs are open in the brain and all the tabs are open on your laptop, just step back, like literally just go outside. Like whether if you don't live in a house, you live in an apartment, even just like open the window, let some air in, go and have a drink of water, just to remove yourself from this overwhelm. Like take yourself, and whatever feels good for you. Like I know shaking is a very good technique for many, like even just like putting on some music and just shaking it out. You know, often, like for me, I don't feel like I want to jump on a yoga mat and do a bucket loads of sun salutes. Some people might have such a surge of energy. But I think even just saying to yourself, I don't need to commit to an hour long or 90-minute practice of whatever it is. Just putting on, even you want a bit of music, because then there's that accountability piece to kind of say there's a start, a middle, and an end. And a lot of the times, like for me, my go-to song, and it bursts me into tears, like it totally cracks me open, is Florence and the Machine, The Dog Days Are Over. Like it even still, and I think because I've been right in the thick of the dog days, and you're like, when are they going to be over? When am I going to get through this really hard time? And I'm in the darkness. So even sometimes I've been walking back from acupuncture and I have listened to that song by the seafront 10 times, and I might run for a little bit and I might just walk. I probably look like some mad woman, but I don't care. Because in that
I think
moment,
there's so many of us have felt that. Like I know for a fact that I've been walking down by the river near where I live, feeling premenstrual, and just had to roar, just like, okay, it's coming up in me, I'm just gonna let it out. And then 2 minutes later I see someone walking towards me with their dog. And I think, oh, I wonder who that was. You know?
and you're like,
It's like,
compose yourself.
like I feel like our world needs you. Talking about the I think you were talking about your inner witch earlier. I feel like there's so many of us who have these impulses that are witchy or from the shadows, or, you know, wild, that there's something about the process of in our inner autumn, letting them have some voice and have some space that's so healing, I think.
And I think as well, like, it's so, like, if you did just stand on a beach and just go, ah, and even scream profanities at the ocean just to release them from your body, like, people would be like, what is she at? Because we're just in such a polite society that's like, you know, just be quiet now, especially women, be quiet now, be good, be over there, and we'll let you know when we need you, you know. So there's, I think I go and do a bit of embodiment dance, and for me that's been some of the most amazing places. So for people who don't know those kind of dances, like you go to, like, look up 5 rhythms, open floor, ecstatic dance, and it's literally dancing as your body tells you. There's no choreography, there's no wrong way to dance. And if you just want to lie on the floor and just be with yourself and just have a little, like, just tune into your body, or have a rest or a nap, or even just a big cry, because these tears are a release, our menstrual blood is a release, ovulation is a release, our sweat is a release, a burp, flatulence, are like shouting, singing, all these, and these are often things that don't, in society, it's like they're impolite. So ideally, if we can get to a place in a forest, or even if we went with a friend, and I think it's easier to feel like weirdos together. So call in your weirdo tribe and go, because also it's nice to feel safety when we do this, because look, it's not always safe for us just to head off to a vast open space on our own. So safety in numbers as well, so that when we are in it, when you're having a release, maybe somebody could just hold the space for you, and then just make sure, you know, oh, there's somebody coming. And so I think the world is so focused around amazing practices like yoga and meditation, but to be honest with you, I think through my recovery, I don't always feel like they've been great gateways into my body, but they're not always the medicine. They're options, they're in my toolkit. But what I found, particularly through the pandemic, was I did just need to dance. And well, if that dance just looked like me shaking, it's like, I think it's Peter Levine says that, he's a trauma expert, if a wild animal goes through a trauma, and if they don't get up and shake it off and shake out the stress that they've just endured in their body, it's highly likely they'll die. So us as humans and domesticated animals, cats and dogs and the likes, we've learned to we've disconnected from our innate wild animal. So for us, just shaking, it's great message for the body to kind of say, I can release from my cells and from my DNA, like just get this stress, trauma, aggravation out of my being.
Yeah. There's also the practice of trauma releasing exercises, which I've studied quite a lot with one of the lead trainers in the UK, Steve Haynes. So TRE. So I might link to that in the show notes. I'm going to link to all of the things that you've been talking about in the show notes.
I've actually done a bit of TRE as well. I found it through lockdown, because I think, and we'll get to that, I suppose, because I have been on a fertility journey, and I think there's a lot of frustration. And I did connect in with an Irish guy who's living in Thailand now, and I did some TRE with him, and it was really like, for me, I'm a champion dissociator. And for people who don't know what dissociation means, it's going off into dream world, and just it was my survival technique that I learned as a child. So if any of us grew up in chaotic, abusive, or really like loud houses, we kind of learned how to just switch off, especially if there was a lot of big voices, big language. So that's definitely something I've had to work with in my body. So for me, some of these practices, I catch my dissociation coming up big time. So some of them can facilitate I facilitate my disembodiment, because I go into just survival mode, and I might go off planning a workshop, or I might start planning a trip in my head, or just start, well, maybe I'll meet such and such a friend. But for me, sometimes just to stay present in my body is the biggest challenge of all.
Don't you think, Kitty, that cycle awareness in itself is this grand process of, like, as we come up through inner spring up towards ovulation, I find that I can get more and more disembodied, but then my inner autumn brings me back as we do that descent back down towards the bleed. It's like I'm being pulled back in, and it's part of the innate healing momentum of the cycle in itself, I think, that it brings us back into our bodies.
Yeah, I think for me, what I've noticed, say for spring into summer, I'm very mindful of the food, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, winter and autumn have stews and broths and real grounding food, whereas I need those foods in spring and autumn, because especially for people like that ecstatics, ADHD, any kind of big energy, we need to live in a life that has a daily and probably hourly check-in, or even if you split the day up into quarters, where am I? How can I facilitate my body? Am I in my body? And these are big asks, like they're exhausting to tune in all day, every day. But I've really noticed how I support myself through spring and summer is like butternut, squash, and even sweet potatoes are definitely part of my food intake, and beetroot, which is phenomenal womb food, and it's actually an aphrodisiac. So for people who are on the preparing for a baby thing, and sometimes you're like, oh, I don't have the libido today, but I need to meet these windows. There's lots of food that are naturally there in nature to support our cycle, and so I think definitely having grounding practices to anchor us down, and not just use spring and summer as you have to go out and do run the legs off yourself. Like if I run the legs off myself, I'll be high for days. So I need to make sure I've got it's a walk, and a little bit of a run if I want to feel like running, but make sure there's the anchoring down and real grounding foods, because otherwise I'll just be up in the clouds for days and totally out of my body.
I know that one. Kitty, let's go to your fertility journey, if you will. Like, could you share a bit about how your cycle awareness practice has supported you, particularly through the healing of your experience?
So I love to share this because I'm very passionate about it. And I think, you know, I just like to say that I'm very much so teaching from the scar and not the wound, because, you know, I had a miscarriage 3 years ago now, and it was a very slow process to recover from that. And I think for myself and my partner Sam, it was very much so an experience that happened to the both of us. Because I just like to say, I do feel like the partners get left out of this, whatever sex they are. Like, just because I know it's mainly happening to my body, but the other person contributed in bringing this person into the world, whether it was just energetically being consciously conceiving or there's actually DNA involved. So very much so knocked the wind out of both our sails. And we felt, I'd say by the summer, if you think, I remember it was around the July, and Sam and I just sat down with each other and we said, we're both really skirting around. We're both really avoiding ovulation. And we were like, we were very much so still making love, like for this conscious act to make a baby. But often we were nearly purposely missing the window that we knew, because I think anyone that's with a cycle awareness woman, their partners, I can't help but they pick up some of the awareness and the lingo and stuff. And we both sat down and we had this massive fear. We desperately wanted, like, the desperation was there. We desperately wanted to conceive, but we were terrified of loss again. So and I think because I got PTSD after my miscarriage, and it was just very hard for him to witness. So he was kind of saying, like, you know, he would have to watch me go through this recovery process, but and then wait for me to get to a point so then he could start his. So it actually kind of took us, I'd say it took us nearly 2 years to really, really just make peace and forget how challenging, because you don't stay in the depths of that suffering forever, thank goodness. But like, I used to just feel, if I've nothing else, and this has happened to me a lot of times through stressful, when life throws you hardship, and you know, I had a bit of depression last summer, and I had a very traumatic incident in my life, and it ended with a bout of depression. And I just took to the bed, and because that's my way, I go into deep rest, I go into hibernation, like going into inner winter or Samhain, like deep winter solstice energy. And I just used to say if I've nothing else, no control over anything else in my life, I can still tune into my cycle. And what I found was, using the 5 chambers of menstruation when I didn't feel archetypally inner summer. So I was able to use, say for just using that experience last summer, it began in May, and I really feel, every time I feel like I've come out the other side, I'm like, God, I thought I came out of it 6 weeks ago, but even now I'm still only feeling. So I felt a bit disconnected from the 4 seasons. So I didn't feel playful in spring and creative in summer, and, you know, wild and the truth speaker in autumn, and then like this wise woman in winter. I just felt rotten, and I felt like I was dying and decaying. I knew I wasn't dying, but I knew something within me was dying through the grief. So it was amazing, because I went into separation. I did have in May, which was the beginning of summer, and then I was in surrender for July, August, September, and then there started to be glimmers of renewal, and then I'd be thrown back into surrender. So, and then, like, you know, then I started to, around Halloween into winter, I started to feel the visions coming in and my creative energy coming back, which was very bizarre, because most people were going into hibernation. So I was like, on like the opposite side of the world. I was going into Baltona with Australia, into summer energy, and the rest of my country was going into deep winter. And it's, I think that process has been incredibly supportive, because when I do feel like I've lost myself or my mental health is being challenged, I'm able to call on these different tools in the kit. And like the 5 chambers of menstruation has helped me through these really stressful, grief-stricken times in my life. And to be able to apply that, I know Abby wrote, and when I read Abby's piece about the 5 chambers of menstruation and miscarriage, that really, I think it really just gave me a whole new perspective, and a lot of comfort, and just to have another map to cycle with, because when you don't feel any of the typical archetypal patterns. So for me, the stress that was coming up around ovulation, like there was absolute lack and loss of libido, because the stress was coming in and it was squashing my probably cortisol, good old cortisol coming in and drinking up all my lovely estrogen. So it just meant that I was feeling really overwhelmed. So what I noticed was, the way I spoke about the void earlier on, that had become, I had the void pre-ovulation. So once I had this realization, I was able to take the tools that I'd implemented for the challenges I'd met in my life and my body and my cycle for the void and inner winter, and I was able to implement them for the fear and the challenges and the pressure that comes with your creative window. And it was this pressure to create. We both felt it. And but it's funny, here we are now, 3 years later, and we're still in the thick of it. But we've now found wonderful ways as a couple to support each other through the fertile window, and we make it as much celebration, like we make it like as much love as possible, and pleasure, but in all things, like we really try to take our time. And I think I know you will understand this as well, but when you're trying and preparing for so long for something that you just hunger for so much, your relationship can just, they can just feel like you want them for their for their bits. And so I think we've really made a conscious effort to come at our journey to holding our baby, to parenthood, trying to make it as joyful as possible, because it's crazy to think that even lovemaking and sex and things like that can come with so much pressure. And I just don't think people talk about this, and especially when we're reading, the archetypal feeling of inner summer is, your libido's up, you feel great, you're really happy. Whereas actually I was feeling just pressure and overwhelmed and anxious, and Sam was too, even though he doesn't ovulate. So it was quite amazing to see how we had these polarities running beside each other, and the awareness. So I just feel really grateful that to have the body of work that I've been able to draw from my toolkit, and the way the cycle, with our MMC work, our menstrual medicine circles, the way the challenges will present in different circles. And often I've just been able to go, well, I wonder how I supported myself in spring. Are those techniques going to help me now in autumn? And often they do. And other times I'm like, no, I actually need to find, maybe I need body work for that, or maybe I need to build my resilience up a different way. Or so I think just flipping the cycle and using my toolkit that I built for inner winter, the early void, was a total game changer for myself and my partner. So that was great.
Thanks, Kitty. Thank you for sharing your personal experience there. And for anyone that hasn't explored the 5 chambers of menstruation, they're mapped out in Alexandra and Shani's book Wild Power, and they really are the phases that we go through with any grief process. So I love the way that you shared, Kitty, that you can take them from the healing place they live in menstruation, and bring them to other parts of the cycle that are feeling challenging. Thank you. Let's get to our quickfire round. Okay, first one. How do you track your cycle at the moment?
So because I'm using a temp drop thermometer, I wear it because I can have chronic insomnia, and I'm not, it's very helpful. I was getting really stressed out with the temperature, so that syncs up with the fertility program I'm working with here in Ireland, and that's been really helpful for me and take the pressure out of my basal body temperature charting. So I love that. That's makes it very easy and accessible for me. The temp drops are expensive, but when you're on this long journey, it's made it very helpful, especially as somebody who's not a great sleeper and stuff like that. And then I have charts, and so when I'm feeling just a little bit like I can't be bothered, or a bit tired, or a bit lazy, I can just say, Kitty, you can manage one word. If you can do nothing else, just write one word. And then if I'm feeling like really on it, and I'm really committed to, I'm in all the practices and really looking after myself, I'll journal as well. But I'd say I would have started with just journaling years ago, and for me now that's got less and less, because I know my body so well, so I can, the little chart is so handy. But I suppose I'm so focused on hormones and basal body temperature at the moment. I'm very much so in that field, so it's easy for me to know what phase I'm at.
Yeah, it's a big part of your life at the moment.
Very much.
Okay, then the next one's about day one, and you said earlier that you need to batten down the hatches. So quick fire, how do you take care of yourself on day one of your cycle?
Bed, food, maybe a movie. I always know I'm really in the deep bleed, going into a deep bleed, if I have the concentration span to watch a movie and another movie, because I wouldn't have a massive concentration. So bed and food, and maybe sofa and movies, or just napping.
Love it. Okay, this one's about your inner autumn, which we've covered so much today. Okay, you're premenstrual and life throws you a curveball, a challenging curveball. What's the very first thing you do?
Yeah, a big stop, a big breath, and just stop and just take stock. Yeah, just even starting with the simplicity of a breath, and then asking my body, what do you need?
Love it. Lastly, what inner season are you enjoying most at the moment?
I have to say we had a very enjoyable inner summer this season. It's very enjoyable. Really made the most of it. So yeah, I think I'm really starting to like inner summer again. I think the fear is slowly starting to go, and with making peace with that, I'm even noticing my cervical fluids are getting better as a 41-year-old woman. So I think instead of feeling afraid at what's not there, I'm loving what is there now. So yeah, I'll go with inner summer, which I've never said before. So
that's so beautiful to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kitty, thank you for your generosity today, for sharing everything that you shared and all of this massive wealth of supportive ideas and tips for working with cycle awareness in a really healing way and in a trauma-informed way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sophie. You're a superstar for pulling this all together. It's amazing. We're blessed to have you doing this wonderful work. Thank you.
And it's drawing to a close now. We've got session 6 happening in 2 days' time, which is our final session before our closing gathering, which is a live event. And the final session is how menstrual cycle awareness can nourish your creativity with Alexandra and Shani. So we'll be looking at how, as you track your cycle, you can track the way that your creative process is working, so that your cycle awareness can serve anything that you're creating in the world. Okay, cheers, Kitty. Take care. Thanks, everybody. See you next
Thank
time.
you. Go well, Slán.